the lineup of today's proceedings before we start. We have got the Student Representative Council President, Ms. Lebogang Ngambule, who is going to speak on behalf of the students of our university and give a perspective to the issues that have unfolded since the beginning of the year, of the academic year. She will give a perspective to that, including on issues that have been featuring in the engagements at various levels, including at our university level. After the president of the SRC speaks, we will invite the Vice Chancellor of the university, Dr. Mabizela, to give us an address on all those issues and related matters. As our audience, you will have an opportunity to contribute to this engagement by way of raising questions. We have in place a system that will accommodate that. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see the icons that are there. Please use the Q&A one to raise your questions. At the moment, we have over 680 attendees. There is no possibility that we will be able to get through 680 questions at this session, but we're going to try as much as possible to do that. The only request that we make of you is to listen carefully to the presentations by the SRC President as well as by the Vice Chancellor. We have tried to incorporate as many of the known issues as possible that have contributed to us having this meeting today. So between the President of the SRC and the Vice Chancellor of our university, they will endeavor to address those issues. But there may be issues for clarity, and there may be things that you feel would not have been addressed sufficiently. We are more than happy to relay those things to the Vice Chancellor to respond to after his address. So that is going to be the format. So I'll request that you continue to place issues as you feel you should on the chat line. We have a team of people who are monitoring those inputs there, who are going to synthesize them so that we can convey them to the interlocutors to be able to respond to them. So you might not get to hear your question as you have packaged it. It is simply because we try to consolidate as much input as possible by way of those questions and comments that will be provided, and give the interlocutors an opportunity to address issues from a thematic rather than a question-specific approach. I hope you find that in order as we are about to get underway. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Lebogang Ngambule, the President of the Students' Representative Council, to give her address. Over to you, Ms. Ngambule.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Indeed you are.
Thank you. Madume, fellow students. Liina langa ke Lebogang Mwadikoshi Ngambule, and I'm the 2021 SRC President. Before I even begin with my input, I would firstly like to observe a moment of silence for Umthokozisi Ntumba. Thank you. It has been exactly 5 days since the SRC led the direction towards the mobilization of a successful, peaceful protest. To add into that, it has been exactly 5 days since the commencement of the academic program. This year started off with so many students having very little hope that they will register and continue with the academic program and continue with the educational aspirations. This still remains the reality of many students who have still not been able to register due to lack of funding, historical debt, and NSFAS defunding. Knowing that at the helm of these issues, NSFAS and the Department of Higher Education and Training. SALS invited SRC presidents and SGs to convene in a meeting in Pretoria upon sending a list of demands. The Deputy Minister, Buti Manamela, addressed these demands. His response was very much disassociated and unsatisfactory and not recognizing the plight of students in this country, where the demand for free education was not the topic of the day. It is then that the national spokesperson, Uthabo Shangase, in his closing remarks, declared a national shutdown. Furthermore, prior to this, the SRC has engaged with university management on a range of issues and later issued a letter of demand to the institution, which is then that the institution vehemently so and unambiguously so rejected to postpone the academic program and has failed to provide viable solutions or alternative, which we find very contradictory after the extension of registration and the continuous use of the mantra, no students will be left behind. With the university having to further recognize that there are students that are greatly much being left behind through the commencement of the academic program. On the 15th of March, in the communique issued by university management articulating that no student will be left behind does not mean that everyone should have the same starting point. We find this statement to be highly problematic as there's no recognition to the unprecedented year that 2020 has been and has left even more students left behind. Through our solidified efforts, the EFF, Student Command, SAS and SASCO further deliberated in ways to demand to management what is due to us as students. Therefore, leading the start of a peaceful protest from Monday at 6 a.m., we further engaged with Union of Workers through the use of reason as to why we should not continue with the normal functionings of the institution. To stand in solidarity with us, to stand in solidarity with the plight of Black, poor, and working class students of this institution who have been continuously left behind and disenfranchised by systems that still do not recognize and still continue to oppress Black, poor, and working class child. Ours is a call for justice and equality for all. We further got exposed to the immense brutality of the response of students' mobilizations in this country. I can mention Trees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall, the IU reference list. When the university on the 16th of March released untrue information stating that student mobilization had acted in ways which constituted legal and disciplinary breaches, being accused of staff intimidation, violence to staff, racial abuse to staff, abuse of university property, and further turning the tables and saying that it is the SRC that is at the forefront, resources are not being provided to students. Surely, why can we then, if these issues are at the forefront, start to then continue with our academic program? We have conducted ourselves processes within the bounds of law and conducted ourselves peacefully. These are mere scare tactics, and we will not be shaken. We have every right to protest. Nowhere was it mentioned that students were victimized, their lives threatened by speeding cars and staff intimidation, and the targeted victimization of staff and student leaders. We were the ones on the ground. We know these issues. Our demands are clear: to postpone with immediate effect the start of the academic program. We are in no position to start. We are left behind. The university has dismally failed to articulate to us what the meaning of a slow and delayed approach will entail, because we have seen in 2020 that this delayed, slow approach left many of us behind. Upon the VC having to finally recognize what has been ongoing on campus, we have brought this to his attention that LLB penultimate environmental studies we can continue, have had assessments before the 26th of March. We proposed for the commencement of the academic program to be on the 29th of March when all students have been cleared to register. Until the creative ways of how to fund LLB penultimate, DPAC, and PGCE students has been well articulated, and these students can be able to register. Up until students have also received their feedback regarding financial appeals. We call on the institution to revisit the academic calendar, to utilize the days and the holidays to engage in academic content. Now, the question becomes, what about those that are not left behind and those that have been engaging in coursework? Well, we are very much aware that on Are You Connected, a lot of this content has already been posted. So therefore, students will continue to have ample time to engage in these courses, while we call for a different time on the 29th of March to only commence then with our academic program. On the demand for allowances, in the meeting with the executive, as the SRC executive and senior management, we engaged upon that all returning students would receive allowances. Surprisingly, to us as the SRC, we communicated this because we're transparent as the SRC. However, upon the communique that came from management, it was said that only OPDAN students would be receiving allowances, following the 2020 NASFA's guidelines. And this was only on the 15th of March, where students would actually be allocated the allowances, OPDAN students be allocated the allowances. I'd like to believe that is the exact same date that the academic program started. This has caused further immense stress, distress, anxiety, and unease among fellow students who were not ready for the commencement of the academic program. Furthermore, the registration of F10s being placed in emergency accommodation would only receive confirmation from NASFAS regarding funding only a few days before the start of the academic program. Furthermore, we want to further express our dissatisfaction in this regard, that no provisions have been made to resident students to receive allowances for their upkeep. It is truly unjust as some students need this allowance for sanitary pads, toiletries, and other basic needs. On international students, a contingency plan has still not been set up for international students moving into the 2021 academic year. Students cannot make dietary provisions. The institution has further recognized that international students must be prioritized in the phased-in approach. This is truly progressive. However, we are finding it so tiring of the vagueness of information for international students. We therefore would like to propose a contingency plan for the institution, because the 99 Rand is truly unjust. The university has had almost a year to create a contingency plan for international students, and they've failed to do so. Those without permits and are outside the country must be given data until such a time that they are given permits. The DVC, Professor Clayton, told the SRC in a meeting that service providers were extorting them for data prices given. It is not extortion if service providers are charging what they normally charge. As the SRC, after research, we have concluded that we will provide the university with a way forward that they must implement to ensure that no international student is left behind. The university should use the international levy paid by each international student to provide data to students. The university can use a blanket approach and pay 400 Rand to each international student in need of data. This amount will be paid into the student's account, and the student can email student fees and have it withdrawn. If the university cannot fulfill this, then all international students must be brought back to campus so they can be able to access HRO and other campus facilities. In the light of the country having to operate under adjusted level 1, in that we call for the institution to operate at 100% capacity and to allow for students to return back to campus. If not, and taking into account the policy around the academic planning that was given to students in the beginning of the year to say that if we can't allow for 100% capacity for students to return under adjusted level 1, that the very same guidelines that guided 2020 cannot be applicable. Because the very same circumstances that resulted in students being left behind during a COVID context have not miraculously changed. On the issue of LLB penultimate, DPAC, and P, this is a national crisis. And we call upon the institution to register all students affected by the NSFAS defunding. This is not the doing of their own. And the VCO to articulate the institutional uniqueness, that many students have found themselves in. The institution needs to be more proactive. In the media on the 11th of March, the Minister of Higher Education and Training articulated that postgraduate funding requires funding to be drew from the National Research Foundation. The 2021 policy review does consider funding students who were NSFAS recipients under the postgraduate approach. In 2021, these students owed to be recognized, and they owed to be funded, and they owed to be registered. In the meantime, we would like to call upon the institution to articulate to us what is meant by creative ways that will be implemented to fund students. I would like to conclude. And in my conclusion, I have 4 closing remarks. Firstly, there's been a lot of distrust that's been created by the university management and SRC, where decisions were made in meetings such as, i.e., allowances for students, and later this being communicated that it would only be OPDAN students. As the SRC, we have found this to be highly disrespectful and condescending to the SRC and further to the student body at large. And it has also further caused a trust amongst ourselves and our fellow students. Secondly, Nelson Mandela University only embarked on only 1 day of a shutdown. This is the management heeded to calls and the demands of the SRC. We hope that the university can follow suit and set this precedence. Thirdly, in the last meeting with senior management, the SRC was made to feel that we are being done a favor by being engaged in that meeting. We are the legitimate and the elected voice, and the voice of the student that is to better serve students of Rhodes University. In us moving forward and finding amicable ways and solutions, we would really like to avoid these paternalistic tendencies of a father and a child relationship between the SRC and Rhodes management. We are all here to serve students and to ensure that we are doing it for the betterment of our fellow students, to improve the conditions of students of Rhodes University. Lastly, the university staff stood in solidarity with students, because this has continuously placed us in places where we are continuously marginalized. Because is it that our only sin that we were born Black and poor and working class, that we continuously have to perform our poverty for us to be recognized? We have also taken into account the complaints that have come from staff of the institution. So therefore, in moving forward, we would like to ensure that we are avoiding having to move into hierarchy of importance and where the reports come from. I, as the SRC president, call the institution to immediately remove all charges and cases and disciplinary hearings if we are to move forward amicably in finding solutions. Because if not, we will continue to mobilize. We will not be shaken. We will not be destabilized. I will repeat my last point to the VC. We call on the institution with immediate effect to remove all charges and disciplinary hearings against student leaders who have been victimized, who have been targeted. Fellow students, we must always affirm that there is power in our unity. Aluta continua, forward with students forward. Ke a leboga.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lebogang. The SRC President, Rhodes University 2021, is Ms. Lebogang Nkambule. Re leboga mme. Thank you very much for your address. We will now invite the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sizwe Mabizela, to address the university stakeholders. Over to you, Dr. Mabizela.
Thank you very much, Tlaha. A very warm welcome to all our students and staff, and also extend a very warm welcome to all our guests who have joined us in this webinar. I do wish to extend a very special welcome to our new students who have joined Rhodes University in 2021. We are delighted that you are part of this distinctive university, a university with unmatched record of academic excellence, best pass and graduation rates, best throughput at postgraduate levels, best research output per academic staff member. Without a doubt, one of the best universities in this country. So we are delighted. This is my first address to you. So we are pleased that you are part of this university. Let me also from the outset extend our unreserved apology to each one of you, particularly those who are in our residences, and to your parents for the immense inconvenience that you have experienced this week. And this is certainly not what you had imagined for yourself. I should also extend an apology to our staff and both academic and support staff who have not only been hampered from accessing their workplaces, but some have also been mistreated. In this presentation, I will cover a number of important issues, some of which have been raised by the President of the Student Representative Council. Let me start by indicating that our public higher education system is under immense strain. Years of underfunding of this public higher education system and absence of adequate funding for academically deserving young people of our country coming from poor and working class families have all combined to create what is clearly a crisis. So until such time that we find an affordable and a financially sustainable mechanism of funding our public higher education system and having appropriate mechanisms of funding all academically deserving young people from poor and working class communities, we will continue to limp from crisis to crisis. One of the major issues facing our higher education system at the moment is what is referred to as student debt. That student debt stands at about 13 billion rand at this moment. And the debt for Rhodes University, the student debt at Rhodes University is about 279 million rand. No higher education institution will be able to fund the education of every deserving young person. It is only this nation, its government, who will have to come up with affordable and sustainable mechanisms of funding academically deserving young people of this country. Rhodes University is an important university, not only nationally, but also in the community of Makhanda. We are the biggest employer in this town, and we contribute the biggest percentage towards the GDP of this town. It is therefore critically important that this institution remains financially sustainable in all the decisions that we take. We must ensure that this university remains financially sustainable, not only for the purposes of contributing to the town, but because it contributes quality and transformative education that many young people of our country and beyond would love to access. I'm delighted that our university makes huge contribution in this town. We have every reason to celebrate, for example, the contribution made by our university through its staff and its students in supporting education in this town. I'm happy to report that in 2020, the schools that we work with performed exceptionally well. And that is a source of pride for us, because we have committed ourselves that we would like to create pathways for young people of Makhanda to realize their full potential. As a caring institution in Makhanda, we want to be sure that we create pathways and opportunities for young people of Makhanda to access quality and transformative education. And in that regard, we have also created a pathway for them who are upgrading their subjects and they're taking some courses at the university. We have created a bridge for that. So this community is incredibly important to us as a university, and we believe we are important to this community as well. And therefore, whatever happens at Rhodes University does not just affect Rhodes University, it affects the greater Makhanda community. And on that score, I do want to salute our many student volunteers who last year, under immense challenges, were able to go out to make a contribution, to make a difference in the lives of those in our surrounding community. And so we must bear in mind that Rhodes University is inextricably bound up with the future of the greater Makhanda community. Let me touch on the issue of the National Student Financial Aid. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme provides funding for young people from poor and working class background to access higher education. In other words, those who come from families whose combined income is no more than 350,000 Rand per annum. And due to the reasons of COVID and the unemployment, there are many more who qualify to receive the funding. Some of the young people who could be funded by their families because of the COVID-19 and the loss of jobs, those cannot fund themselves anymore. And therefore they have to go to NSFAS and apply through NSFAS. But more than that, as the minister has indicated, because of the COVID-19 challenges, the 2020 academic year had to be extended. So NSFAS used more money last year than they had. And what this has done is to create a shortfall in the funding of the National Student Financial Aid for 2021. The shortfall was estimated to be about 6.3 billion Rand. And so the National Student Financial Aid delayed making decisions regarding those students who had applied for funding for 2021, the new first-time entering students. NSFAS gave a clear undertaking that those students who were funded in 2020, who were in good academic standing and were progressing in their studies, they would be funded. So the issue was about the first-time entering students. And so there was a delay in the announcement of the outcome of the applications of those young people. So they approached the Department of Higher Education, and the minister approached the cabinet, and he made an announcement last Thursday that cabinet had directed the ministry to reprioritize some of the budget allocated to the Department of Higher Education in order to meet the NSFAS shortfall. What that means in real terms is that the Department of Higher Education has to cut funding to higher education institutions and redirect that funding to address the NSFAS shortfall. That, of course, will have serious ramifications for our institutions of higher learning. And so by the end of the week, last week in the weekend, NSFAS announced the list of those that would be funded. But of course, our registration was on the weekend of the 5th, and there are students who had applied to NSFAS, and we allowed them to register at Rhodes University, notwithstanding the fact that they had not received any confirmation of funding. And thankfully, most of them were approved for funding except for a handful of those. And those students have been given an opportunity to sign an acknowledgement of debt or to make their arrangements to fund their education. They're still in our university. They are accommodated in our university. We will never kick any young person out under these circumstances. They have registered and they're able to engage in the teaching and learning processes of our university. They can access Wi-Fi, they can go to the computer labs and so on and so forth. And it's really a very small number of those, and we are dealing with that situation. Let me touch on the issue of the NSFAS allowances. The university has not as yet received guidelines or directives from the National Student Financial Aid regarding the living and book allowances for NSFAS students. On the 15th of March, as has been indicated, the university paid allowances to NSFAS students, and more than 80% of these opulent students received their allowances on Monday the 15th. Now, living allowances always commence in the beginning of the academic month. And in this year, of course, that is March. They received double allowance because they need to provide a security when they secure their accommodation. So they need funding that will cover 2 months. So on the 15th of March, they received that double payment. And now staff are working over this coming long weekend to clear as many of the remaining candidates as possible so that the next round of payments can be made on the next working day, which is Tuesday, because Monday is a holiday. So all those who were registered by Monday who are opulents, they received their allowances. And those who registered after Tuesday, after Monday, they will be receiving their allowances on Tuesday next week. Now, this has been a significant accomplishment, given that staff have not been able to access their workspaces this week. And this, of course, has created a huge backlog, which must be cleared because young people need to be provided with the funding that they need. I must indicate that NSFAS indicated to all universities that the first tranche of their payment can only be in April. So what it means is that the university has to advance all NSFAS students at this stage regarding their accommodation and regarding their living allowances. And that is not small change. The university had planned to pay allowances to NSFAS qualifying students who are in the residences this week. But staff were not able to access their offices to do this. And this payment can now be done next week, Tuesday. But when it comes to the first time entering students, we will have to get their bank details so that we can pay them as well. So the university is advancing the amount needed for students who need to purchase laptops. We are advancing them so that they can continue with their studies. They can access learning materials while we await NSFAS directives. Studies are currently online. Students are able to access the learning materials in other ways. And so the university is doing everything to advance every deserving student so that they are able to engage the academic activities. Among the first-time entering students who had applied for NSFAS, no student on campus has been required to leave. It's one of those unfortunate statements that are made without any foundation in truth. Applicants to NSFAS who have not been cleared by NSFAS have had to provide their own payment plan, as I have indicated. And all students who were in temporary accommodation have had their registration issues resolved. They have to provide their payment plan, as I've indicated, and those who choose to go to off-campus accommodation will be able to do so. Let me touch on the issue of NSFAS appeals. There are students who were funded by NSFAS last year who have had to appeal. I mentioned earlier on that NSFAS informed all universities that students who have done well academically, who meet the criteria for continued funding, namely, they have passed 50% or more of their courses, they are on track to complete their degree program in N+1 year in respect of the new bursary scheme, which started in 2018, or in N+2 years for the other students. They said that they will fund those students. So that is not an issue. However, those students who do not meet those criteria are afforded an opportunity to appeal at NSFAS why they should continue to be funded. So the way this works is that the university looks at the criteria as set out by NSFAS and apply those criteria and make recommendations to NSFAS. The final decision is that of NSFAS. The university does not take a final decision. The university simply screens them and look at the criteria and indicates to NSFAS that this list of students meet the criteria for funding, and this list does not meet the criteria. And so the final decision is that of NSFAS, and there is an appeal process, and students are appealing in that regard. I really want to underline that NSFAS makes the final decisions. Let me touch on the issue of off-campus accommodation and accreditation thereof. The Department of Education instructed the universities that for students who live off campus, we must make sure that they live in conditions that are conducive to quality learning. And so those places that accommodate students have to be accredited before NSFAS can provide funding for them. In other words, they have to meet a certain minimum set of standards in order for them to be accredited for NSFAS students. So our university has a policy in that regard, and we are applying that policy, but because it's a relatively new policy, we have been really vetting, by and large, the places that are rented by our students. But what is absolutely critical for NSFAS funding is that there should be a contract between our student and the landlord. There must be a rental agreement, and that rental agreement should be for the year 2021. Of course, they must be registered in the first place, and there must be a rental agreement. And once we have that, then we are able to advance at this stage. We just advance our students. And this, of course, is putting immense pressure on our very limited resources. But it is on the understanding that NSFAS will reimburse the university. Let me touch on the issue of NSFAS and the LLB funding. NSFAS has made it very clear to the universities that its mandate is to fund the first undergraduate degree. And that they do not have a mandate to fund any second qualification or any qualification post that first degree. So there has been some confusion because they have funded the LLB before, and now they are quite firm, and they communicated that they will no longer fund the LLB, and they will not fund the PGCE and any postgraduate qualification of any kind. That, of course, creates problems for students, particularly in our case, where we have the 3+2 LLB program, which we believe is the best qualification for lawyers. You take 3 years doing undergraduate degree, BCom or BA law, and then you take 2 years to complete your LLB. And so we took a decision as a university that for 2020, we should create a mechanism for students who are doing LLB to complete their studies. In other words, we will allow them to sign an acknowledgement of debt and in respect of their tuition and the learning materials. And in that way, they should be able to complete their studies. We are unable to assist many other postgraduate qualifications. The university does not have resources to provide bursaries for students at postgraduate level. And I think I have to make that clear because we're already sitting with a debt of about 280 million rand. No university can provide bursaries or free education to students under these circumstances. The other thing, of course, that the SRC has raised with the university is that we should scrap the 5-year LLB program, the 3+2 pathway towards LLB. Again, as I've indicated, this is an important route for many young people. In effect, what the SRC is saying, we should reduce opportunities for young people to pursue their LLB studies. We do have a 4-year undergraduate LLB, but we believe that those students who want to do a BCom or a BA first and have a solid grounding in that formative education, and then after that pursue a 2-year qualification in LLB, that they are better lawyers, they are better trained in that way. So we cannot agree with the SRC that instead of creating more opportunities for our students to pursue their LLB, we should rather reduce them and scrap the 5-year LLB. One of the most critical things in this country, which was agreed on in 1955, was that the doors of learning and culture shall be open. And therefore, if you reduce the opportunities, you are denying people an opportunity to pursue their interests. So we really believe in the 3+2 LLB program. We have made representations at DHET and at NSFAS that this is an important route to LLB and it must be supported. And not only Rhodes University, there are other universities that are also of the view that if we were to do away with the 3+2 LLB, we would be that much the poorer. And so we will not accede to that kind of a request. Now, there have been questions raised regarding the return of students to campus. And again, the president of the SRC has raised that here. Not all returning students have yet been invited back to campus. And this is for a good reason. We are doing this invitation in a very structured way because of the COVID-19 and the fact that in Makhanda, the health facilities are not adequate to deal with any outbreak. So those who have not yet been invited back to campus are encouraged to continue working online. We have the emergency remote learning, but as the things improve, we will invite them back to come to Makhanda. But at the moment, we are doing this in a very structured, in a phased manner, so that we do not create a health crisis in Makhanda. So we will continue to pursue that phased approach in inviting students back to Makhanda. We have committed ourselves that no student should be left behind as we engage in our emergency remote teaching and learning. That is important. No student should be left behind. And when we say that no student should be left behind, this does not mean that every student should be at the same starting point on the first day before anything can happen. That's not what we mean. It means that we should have in place mechanisms to ensure that students who are negatively impacted are able to catch up, that they are supported to get up to speed and catch up with others. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic that we are dealing with and the risk of the third and fourth waves, we really have to be very, very careful. And so we are bringing students in this phased manner so that we manage the situation and that we adhere to the strict protocols of health. And it is also the practice at Rhodes University that students are permitted to change courses. When we talk about starting at a slow pace, the first 2 weeks, students change courses and things really settle down after 2 weeks or so. And this is very common at Rhodes University. And so that is how we have started. And I think I must indicate that as part of ensuring that no student is left behind, we have clearly indicated that no assessment in the form of tests and assignments will be required of students until after the 26th, because our registration will only close on the 26th. And so that is important. And again, I just want to underline the fact that we are ensuring that every student is assisted. Anyone who only joins the university later between now and the 26th will be assisted so that they catch up with their work. Because we are using online teaching and learning, all the materials are available on our learning management system. And so these can be accessed, but more than that, if a student needs further explanation of the concepts, academics are there to support them. But what is also critically important is agency. Our students have to exercise agency. If you have fallen behind, it is incumbent upon you to go to your academic, to your lecturer or to your tutor and be sure that you are assisted. So the university will provide academic support to all students who, for one reason or another, are unable to start immediately with their studies. So again, as I've indicated, the slow approach will be implemented differently according to the implementation nuances necessitated by different disciplines. But the basic principle is that there should be consideration made for those who will start late in terms of assignments, tests, and DPs. But we have already made a clear decision, and we have communicated that all those will only be due or be done after the closing date of registration. Insofar as the learning materials and talking about laptops here for the first time entering students, I'm really happy to say that the university has taken delivery, in fact, advanced delivery of enough laptops for every first time entering student who requires a laptop. As soon as they are registered and they need a laptop, it is there available for them, because every young person should be able to pursue their studies without any impediment. And of course, this was proceeding exceedingly well and very smoothly last week. And this allocation of laptops could not proceed this week because staff were unable to go into their offices to load software and make sure that those laptops are ready. So the final point that I want to address relates to international students, and the SRC president has mentioned that international students who are inside the country and who have not yet been invited back to campus at this stage are receiving mobile data units or bundles like any other student at Rhodes University. So all the 4 mobile carriers provide that assistance, and we're paying for the data. Now, despite many efforts on our part, the same kind of agreements could not be achieved for those students who are outside the borders of our republic. But international students who are in this situation must contact the international office. And to date, 227 international students have been issued with permits to return to campus. So we are prioritizing these international students, particularly those who are outside the borders, to come back to campus so that they will continue with their studies. Then in sum, I must indicate that the university is doing everything possible to address the needs of our students. We are doing everything possible within our limited resources to make sure that every young person who is registered at Rhodes University receive the quality education, that transformative, formative education that this university is renowned for. And we will continue to do that for each and every one of our students. Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs.
Vice Chancellor, thank you very much. And the same gratitude goes to Lebu. We move on to the next and the final segment of our engagement online. We had promised and we had invited you to send your questions while the presentations were underway. I have to say that the questions were sent real time. And it so happened, as the questions continued to come, that the speakers touched on some of these questions. We also have got some comments that have been voiced to the various speakers. I propose to do it the following way, VC and Ms. Nkambule. I will just restate the thematic areas. As I said, that the questions would be collated into themes, because we can't put all the questions, as you probably can see on the Q&A, we have got over 50, it's growing. First, let me say, keep putting those questions through. And in fact, I will even leave an address after this, communications@ru.ac.za, because there's so much value in the questions that have been asked. And we feel that let's continue the conversation and have those questions come in. We'll make sure that we engage with all the various portfolio owners within our university to be able to respond to each and every question that you may ask. So no question will be lost, and all these questions will be responded to in due course, and we'll be in contact with the SRC on how best we can reflect this information back to you that you're asking. But VC, if you could just note some of these questions, I'll just summarize them. And I also am cognizant of the fact that some of these questions would have been responded to, but I think it's still very important that people should hear that their questions would have been taken note of. They are under various themes. They are under allowances, they are under accreditation of accommodation, they are under international students, they are under funding, they are under the academic program. And the SRC president and the VC would have talked to some of these issues. One, under allowances. In the absence of NSFAS funding, where is the university getting the money to pay the Opiden allowances, as it happened last week, and the rest of the students, as it should happen going forward? That's one. If you don't mind, I'll just go through all of them, because they have been made concise by Team One, and I think then you'll be able to jot them down to respond. The second one, under the academic program, says, how many students are registered to date on the university's database? What does it mean that the academic year is moved? I suppose it should say, what does this mean in view of the deferral of the commencement of the academic program to the 26th? In other words, will lecturers still continue at this time? That's the second one. Under funding, it says, why does the NSFAS funding mandate include only the first qualifications? What are the universities doing about ensuring that there is a comprehensive cover in relation to education? There's a comment. It says here, comment for the SRC president. It says, it is not only Black people that struggle to pay for students and who get turned away. The second one says, students must endeavor to play their part in advancing themselves without feeling unduly entitled. And finally, it says, why is the SRC president threatening the vice chancellor at the end of her speech? Under funding again, the university's plan for financially excluded students. Can you elaborate on that? What is your plan to accommodate financially excluded students? The university must review the financial appeals process for students. The other one relates to the LLB students in terms of the Rhodes University structure, 2+1. It says, how is the university planning to fund the LLB students? And finally, the appeal process. Please explain how this works. It doesn't specify which appeal process, but if you reference it to the financial exclusion, it might be about that. But maybe we could talk about the pertinent appeals process that students have got a particular interest in. Second last question, Vice Chancellor, says, when can all categories of students expect to receive their respective allowances? Please touch on the structure of the one already received by Opidens, resident students and book allowances. Does the university make the decision about this, or is it determined elsewhere and Rhodes University simply receives a directive in terms of the disbursements of those allowances? Then in relation to the last point you made, VC, which was about the international students, it says, can you comment about access to data? This is in the context of international students. And finally, the plans for their return to campus. As I've indicated, these are broad themes that we have captured, but we are assuring you that all the questions that have been placed under Q&A will be engaged with, will be responded to, and any additional questions that we have, without supplanting the current arrangement that you have with the student leadership, we will certainly ensure that we harness the energy that was put behind this collective reflection between us by continuing to entertain those questions, facilitate their responses, and share the information that will be generated through that process. Cognizant of the time on a Friday before a long weekend, I suppose this is only going to be the round of questions and comments that we can share with you. Over to you, Vice Chancellor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Let me just preface my responses by telling each one of you how inordinately privileged I am to be the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University. It's a singular honor to serve this great institution with a legacy of academic excellence, but an institution that is firmly embedded in its community, an institution that is making every effort to make sure that young people of our country receive quality and transformative education. So I just want to make that very clear that one of the best things that ever happened to me was to be part of this fine institution. So the first question that was asked is, where do we get the money for the Opiden allowance? I indicated to you that NSFAS will only give us our first tranche in April. We know that our students are here and we need to start the academic activities. Our academic program cannot wait until April. So what we do, we take money, some of the money that is available, some of it is made available to us for research and for other things, for infrastructure. And we use all that money that is available to us to advance the NSFAS students, the Opidens, so that they can pay their rent and be properly housed and be able to get the learning materials. In good faith, I must say that NSFAS will make good on their promise. So it is funding that is intended for other purposes, which we then use to bridge the gap between now and the NSFAS funding. The second question that was asked was in relation to the numbers. To date, we have 1,088 students, new first-time entering students. This is the number which I think was last Friday, and that number has gone up. And our undergraduate students, it's 5,267. Again, that's the number before NSFAS announced the release of those who were funded by NSFAS. I think I must make this clear. We cannot delay the academic activities when thousands of young people have registered and are ready to move ahead. But we are committed to ensure that those who, for one reason or another, are not yet able to register, that they are supported and brought up to speed as I have indicated. It would be a travesty of justice if we said to these thousands of young people, wait until everyone has registered and then we can all start. It would be an absolute travesty of justice. But what is important is that when they register, those who have not registered yet, that we support them in every conceivable way to get up to speed with what has been done. And as I've indicated, between now and the 26th, they will not have to submit any assignments. They will not have to take any tests. These forms of assessment will only take place after the 26th. There was the issue of why NSFAS focuses on undergraduate students. It's really a simple fact of available resources. NSFAS has made it very clear that the funding available is to really give every young person that first step of getting an undergraduate degree. And once you have completed that undergraduate degree, you will have many more opportunities of getting funding, bursaries, and so on. But of course, I must indicate that in our discussions with the minister, we have made it very clear that we need to find a comprehensive and holistic mechanism of funding students from undergraduate degree all the way to postgraduate degree. But the available resources at the moment are prioritizing undergraduate degree students. There was a question about financial exclusions. You know, one of the biggest challenges, and I really want us to get our heads around this, one of the biggest challenges is that by and large, students who experience financial exclusions are students who are not performing well academically in the first place. Some of them would have lost their NSFAS funding because they have not managed to keep the level of performance that is required for continued funding by NSFAS. It is almost automatic with NSFAS that if you meet their progression requirements, they will fund you. It's the same thing with bursaries. Bursaries require a certain level of academic performance for them to continue to fund you. So many of the students lose their funding because they have not managed to perform at a level that allows their funder to continue funding them. So that is a big challenge. It starts with the issues of academic performance. That might, of course, be a result of a variety of things, people experiencing all kinds of trauma and so on and so forth. But at a basic level, people lose their funding because they have not performed at a level that allows their funder, including NSFAS, to continue funding them. The appeals are determined by NSFAS, as I have indicated. They have their own criteria, and we simply advise them based on their criteria so that they are able to make those decisions. When can all categories of students receive, NSFAS funding? I have indicated that all NSFAS qualifying students, whether they are oppidans or they are in residence, will receive their funding next week. They could have received that money this week were it not for the fact that staff could not access their offices. So the sooner staff are able to access their offices, they will be able to process these and they will be paid out to the students. I also indicated that oppidan students who had registered by Friday the 12th received their funding on Monday because that was processed during the weekend for payment on Monday. So it could not be affected by the problems that denied staff an opportunity to go to their offices. The issue of international students, as I have indicated, we are unable to provide data for them. We are prioritizing them for return to Rhodes University. We had discussions with MTN, Vodacom. These operate continentally, but they made it very clear that they're absolutely not interested. It also has to do with economies of scale. And so we are seized with the issue of international students. And I must convey our sincere appreciation and deep gratitude to our academics who reach out to all our students via WhatsApp, and they phone them and they reach out to them so that they can support them wherever they are, including those who are outside the borders of this country. And I really take my hat off to our staff for going that extra mile to ensure that our students are afforded a fair and a just opportunity. Support staff do the same. Just about everyone at Rhodes is deeply invested in ensuring that the young people that have been entrusted to our care in regard to their education are well looked after. I honestly could not ask for more. Thank you very much, Klaag.
Vice Chancellor, President of the SRC, I see that we have dipped below 1,000 in the audience now. So I really hope that we could give Ms. Nkambule a chance and then bring it to a halt thereafter. Ms. Nkambule, I see you're ready to respond to some of the issues that were directed your way.
All right, thank you very much. I have been listening attentively with a pen and a paper to what the Vice Chancellor, thank you very much, Dr. Siza Madizela, has been saying. To be quite honest, I really am baffled because there's a reiteration of the issues. Nothing is being addressed. So I'm of the assumption that moving from here, we'll probably have to have another address whereby the Vice Chancellor is really providing us with tangible solutions. I mentioned in my address to say that if the commencement, if we are continuing, like the Vice Chancellor is alluding to, of the academic program, what are the alternatives? And these alternatives need to be articulated. We are very much tired as a student body to be hearing the dilly-dallies of we will be making sure that students are accommodated. Articulate that to us. Have it in paper if needs be. Will it be for each and every single department where we are using the very same approach? Because even in our address, myself and the Vice Chancellor, we have made him aware that students are currently having assessments. He was very much not aware that students were having assessments. So for me, it is very worrisome. This address has been very worrisome. I have had nothing that is addressing the demands of students currently. And just to further add, I want to say that whoever, Chair, I'm assuming you are the Chair, Luzuko Jacobs, to say that as the SRC, I made a threat to the Vice Chancellor, I find it to be very problematic. And whoever has made that comment to call themselves into order, because a threat, definition of a threat is a statement of an intention to inflict pain, injury, damage, or other hostile action to someone in retribution for something that has not been done or has been done. I made it very clear, and I also want the VC to address this, to say, I have made it twice when I was doing my input, to say all the charges and all of these disciplinary actions for students, all of it going forward, they must fall. We will not be having any to victimization going forward from here. So I'd like the VC to address that going forward. And also, I will continue to reiterate, I have not made a threat to the Vice Chancellor, and we need to stop with these tendencies of having student leaders being at the point of making threats when they are saying how they are feeling and how we should be moving forward. I thank you very much.
You're muted. Mr. Jacobs, you are muted.
My apologies. My apologies, VC. I didn't mean to do that. I was just saying thank you very much, Lebo, for your concluding remarks. I was also just indicating I fully appreciate that this is not a conflict resolution platform. This is a platform for mutual reflection. This is a platform for information exchange. This is a platform that is an instrumental means of getting forward in dealing with our shared challenges. So I'm not going to seek to respond to all the things, but just to clarify a little bit that we have got an uncensored line that is running as we speak. You probably would see that the Q&A are continuing to climb, and to the extent that we have said, let's have that additional chance to continue to send these. So that was a comment that was placed on the line, and it was requested that it be put to you, and I'm glad that you have addressed it. So we'll just request the Vice Chancellor to conclude it before we bring it to a close. Thank you. Over to you, Vice Chancellor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Let me start by addressing the issue that has just been raised by the President of the SRC. The Vice Chancellor does not decide on who should or should not be charged in terms of disciplinary matters. We have a disciplinary code. The university has a responsibility to uphold the environment that is conducive to teaching and learning. I'm not aware of any person who is victimized, and I've been at Rhodes for almost 17 years. If there are charges which are preferred against a student and that student has not committed any offense, then obviously those charges will not be sustained in any process of any form. And so I cannot sit here and claim that I know that there are no students, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the disciplinary code, who would be victimized. So I think we should just put that to rest. I'm immensely grateful for the opportunity of having had this opportunity to address you, our students, and address staff of our university. And there may well be some parents who have joined us. Thank you very much for taking time. For me, nothing is more important than ensuring that every young person of this country is afforded a fair and a just opportunity to realize his or her full potential. And at Rhodes, we have certain values, we have certain principles, we have certain policies, all of which guide our interaction as a community. And those will be upheld at all times. So thank you all to our students who, particularly who only started this year, and those who are continuing. I wish you everything of the best. You must know that as the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University, my number one priority is to ensure that you receive quality, transformative education so that you can make a contribution not only to your family, but to humanity. We must contribute towards the realization of a better society, a more just, a more humane, a more caring, a more inclusive, a more compassionate society. And that is the responsibility of each and every one of you, young people who are receiving education from Rhodes University. So it falls on you, it falls on me, that we make this country, we make this continent, and we make this world the best that it can be. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Have a wonderful year and continue learning and developing and asking, and use the power of reasoned argument and logic to tackle all the issues that need to be tackled. One of the things that we are very proud of as Rhodes University is that we want you to develop the skills of using knowledge and using evidence to argue and debate. And ideas are the lifeblood of this university. So thank you very much, and thanks to our academics. Thank you to our support staff. You all make us very proud. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Ms. Ngambule. Remember the name Mthokozisi Ntumba. Remember the name of the late Mr. Mthokozisi Ntumba, and may his soul rest in peace. And I also shared the email address to which I invite you to continue to send those questions. Those that have been received, all 153 of them shall have been recorded, and they will continue to be processed into the new week. I would like to thank everybody who has made the time to attend this engagement online, and I really do hope and pray that this is a start of positive engagement towards a resolution of the complexity of the problems that we face as a nation in South Africa, as a university, as a student body, as workers of this university, as the community of Makhanda. Thank you very much for making time. All of you have a blessed long weekend. Thank you.